Hello, everyone, first of all, and welcome to this Migration to Listings API webinar. My name is Federico, and I work as a solutions architect at Amazon Selling Partner Developer Services. This webinar is intended for any Selling Partner API developer that is currently submitting listings to Amazon using XML or flat files, and is considering or has already started migrating to the new and optimized solution that the Listings API offers. The goal of today's session is that at the end, you have clarity on the new solution that we offer and have all the tools and resources to define a successful migration strategy tailored to your needs. So let's get started with the agenda. The agenda for today will start with the basics of listings on Amazon and then dive a bit deeper into technical concepts and best practices. So first of all, we will start by doing an overview of the legacy system based on XML and flat files, and then present the new solution. We will compare both alternatives and emphasize on the benefits of using the Listings API. Next, we will dive deep into the different migration strategies that you can follow and share resources that will help you in this journey. We will supplement the information with a short demo on how to use the Listings API. And finally, we will leave some time for Q&A. However, of course, if you have some questions during the session, feel free to ask them in the chat and we will monitor and answer those. So our first topic in the agenda for today is the legacy solution. I assume most of you are familiar with it, but in case you are not, let's do a quick review. The legacy solution, previously available in MWS and also supported in SPAPI, is based on Feeds API and XML and flat files. It consists of 6 different feed types to cover all different use cases. For example, we have the post-product data feed type that allows selling partners to submit product facts to Amazon. And similarly, the post-inventory availability data feed type provides a way to update inventory quantities. Other feed types enable the end-to-end experience of setting prices, variation, and images. The format used to submit data using this solution could be XML or flat files, as I mentioned before. And finally, one characteristic of this solution is that in line with MWS, which is an API that was only available to sellers, the solution can only be used by sellers. So you can only submit seller listings, but you cannot submit listings for vendors. The new solution, launched in 2021, comes as a set of API sections and notification types instead of a single one, the Feeds API, like before. We like to refer to these API sections as building blocks, since they can be freely combined in multiple ways to achieve different use cases. While there are mandatory steps and some actions have to follow a specific order, these building blocks are flexible enough to adapt to the particularities of your product and offer. So there are 5 API sections that help build the end-to-end listings experience. The product type definitions API provides the product schemas containing the attributes for different categories. The catalog items API provides information of items that exist in the Amazon catalog, namely existing ASINs. The listings restrictions and the listings items API are used to obtain ASIN restrictions for selling partners and to submit and read data to and from Amazon. This could be creating, updating, deleting, or retrieving listings item. Finally, the Feeds API can also be plugged to the previous building blocks to transmit data in bulk. We have also introduced 5 notification types that help optimize the listings workflow. They are the product type definitions change, the branded item content change, the item product type change, the listings item issues change and the listings item status change. With them, you can be proactively notified when events that are relevant to your setting partner's listings occur. In a few minutes, we will provide an example of how a best practice listings workflow is implemented using these building blocks. So you might be wondering which use cases are supported with the use of Listings API, and these are the ones on the list. First of all, listing a product that doesn't exist in the Amazon catalog, meaning nobody is selling that item yet. To accomplish this, the Product Type Definitions API provides you with product schemas in JSON format that include all attributes and constraints for the corresponding category. You can also create offers for products that already exist in the Amazon catalog. In this case, the data requirements are minimal, limited to pricing and inventory attributes. Updating listings is, of course, also possible. The Listings API provides the ability to limit your submissions to the attributes that you want to change, reducing this way the likelihood of getting an error or mistakenly updating information. Sometimes you just want to delete an existing SKU and start from scratch. You can also do that with the Listings API. And finally, reading listings item is, of course, also supported. This includes reading product attributes like description, images, and bullet points, as well as issues affecting the listing. As promised, here's a sample workflow created using the building blocks presented earlier. This workflow integrates the required and suggested steps to list an item that doesn't exist in the Amazon catalog. So let's walk through it. The first step is to use the Catalog Items API to confirm that there is no ASIN that matches the product that you want to submit. Once confirmed, you need to identify and retrieve the correct product type for it. The Product Type Definitions API will help you achieve this goal. Next, you need to build a JSON document that includes all mandatory attributes for that category. This information is provided in the product schema. So that's easy to do. Ideally, and in order to improve the quality of your submission, you will also include non-mandatory attributes. Before sending the data, it is important to validate that the rules included in the schema are met. This way, you will reduce the chances of getting back an error from the API, basically. Once the data was validated, you will submit it to Amazon using the put operation of the Listings Items API. If there are validation errors, the API will return them synchronously. Otherwise, the asynchronous processing will start. The listings item status and/or issues change notifications will inform you about the results of this asynchronous processing. If there were any errors, you will go ahead and fix the data and submit again. If there were no errors, the item is now part of the Amazon catalog. Great. So why is the new Listings API the recommended solution? The following comparison will help you understand. First of all, as you probably know from your own experience, the legacy solution lacks clear definition of the data requirements. The XML and flat files are not always up to date and don't always include relevant information like mandatory attributes and valid values. The product schemas provided by the Product Type Definitions API solve that issue by including in their definition an exhaustive list with a lot of information to help you submit successfully. Example of this is mandatory attributes, valid values, and data constraints like mean and max length of attributes. These schemas also provide rules that help you confirm if the data that you are about to submit is valid or not. For example, when the presence of an attribute turns another one mandatory, this is informed. These rules adhere to the JSON schema and can be easily validated using the available open source tools and libraries so you don't have to implement anything on your side. Next, the feedback mechanism has considerably improved. The Listings API provides information about submissions, both synchronously and asynchronously. For example, while some issues are detected synchronously and included in the API response, some others might be detected at a later processing stage and therefore shared asynchronously using notifications and the read operations of the Listings API. Combined, both mechanisms help capture all issues associated to submissions. Also, a recurring pain point with the legacy solution is the fact that the XML templates don't always include the latest changes to the taxonomy. The new schemas, the JSON schemas, on the other hand, are always up to date. Finally, the new solution also supports vendors. This means that by migrating to the Listings API, your customer base can increase and you can offer your solution to more and more selling partners. We will now focus on the migration process from feeds to Listings API, which is probably the most interesting part for you. We will share some best practices, recommendation, and some resources as well. So first of all, it is important to mention that both the legacy and the new systems can coexist. This means that migration can be executed incrementally, starting from a simple use case and validating the changes iteratively. We will dive a bit deeper into this topic in the next slide. Also noteworthy is the fact that not all product types are currently available in the product type definitions API. The number change between business segment. For vendors, for example, all product types are already available and have been launched. But for sellers, however, the coverage is around 50%, with majority of soft lines and hard lines already launched, and the rest planned for this year, 2023. Additionally, Amazon Business Pricing feature is not supported yet, but will also be launched soon. Finally, how you approach migration will, of course, affect the results. It is very important that you understand your use case well, so you can take the optimal migration path. Because we know that listings workflows are complex to implement, we always recommend developers to start with a simple scenario. Once the basic setup is done, integrating additional use cases is way simpler. And of course, following our recommendations and best practices will help you achieve better results. So we mentioned earlier that both the legacy and the new solutions can coexist. You might be asking, what does it mean? How can you migrate your workloads in an iterative and controlled fashion, keeping part of the logic in the current system while rolling out and testing other sections? To accomplish this, there are two migration strategies that you can follow. The first one is migrating by use case. This means, for example, keeping the logic for new listings creation in the legacy solution and moving the updates to the new one. Because updates are easier to implement in the Listings API, you can start with this use case, and once it is tested and validating, you can migrate the listings creation, which is more complex. You could also decide to migrate the logic to update sales terms like inventory and prices to the Listings API and keep updates to product facts, which are more complex, in the old solution. Same as before, once you have successfully finished migrating the sales terms, you can start the work to migrate product facts. The second migration strategy, which is not exclusive of the one we just mentioned, is to migrate your workloads by category. Because not all JSON product schemas are already launched, you might need to keep some categories running in the legacy solution. This is totally supported, and once product schemas for the new categories become available, you can easily move them to the new solution. The product type definitions change notification that we mentioned earlier is a great complement if you follow this migration strategy, since it will notify whenever a new product type has been launched. So with this in mind, what is the recommended approach to take? First of all, we recommend integrating the listings read logic and notifications. This will give you the ability to read the data that you submit to Amazon and be notified when there are changes to your listings. Once this is done, the next step would be to iteratively migrate the right logic by use case. For example, start with price and inventory, and then move to a different use case. Having the ability to read listings and receive notifications from Amazon for your submissions will help you validate your implementation and gain confidence. You can run shadow testing to validate the new functionality and then move to the new use case. We know that a critical part of the listings integration is the attribute mapping. Most of you have probably created a mapping between the XML files and your own taxonomy to address this issue. So in order to simplify the migration process, we have created a mapping guide which matches the attributes from the legacy and the new schemas. As an example, here we have the XML path and valid values for condition type and the corresponding JSON values. Also, in the last 2 rows of the table, you can see how item dimensions attribute is expressed in the XML file and in the JSON schemas. With this guide, which we have attached to the handout section of the webinar, you should be able to easily migrate the attribute mapping to the listings API solution. Make sure to check all the documents that we have attached to the handout section. Now let's dive a bit deeper into how the JSON representation of attributes look like. We'll focus on valid values first. Here in this slide, you can see how the list of valid values for condition type is represented in a JSON schema using the enum tag. In this case, the accepted values are new, used like new, and refurbished. This functionality will help you pre-populate your forms or user interface and provide a better user experience to your customers. And also, it will help you validate that the data specified by the selling partner is correct and valid. Next, let's take a look at attributes with sub-properties, which might be a bit more complex to understand. For example, in this slide, we have item height, which is part of item dimensions attribute. It requires users to input both a value like 2.7 and a unit like inches in this case. You can see in the JSON representation how this is specified. And to finish, let's see an example of the JSON representation of a pricing feed. So this includes all the information. On the left, you can see the XML version where you specify an operation type. In this case, we are using update, an SKU, and the price, with the currency being included as a property of the XML doc. On the right, we have the equivalent input, but in JSON format for the listings API. Since we just want to do a partial update, we set the operation type to replace and specify the path of the attribute we want to update. In this case, purchasable offer. We set the currency to US dollars and the price to 90. And that's it. If we wanted to update additional attributes, like for example, bullet points, images, or inventory, we could do it in the same operation. We don't need to send a different feed. It is important to mention that this JSON document is submitted as request body to the API, not as a feed like in the legacy solution. This, of course, simplifies the process since you don't have to upload the feed document and read the processing report, but just do one API call. Now let's do a quick demo on how to use the listings API, a more interactive approach. In this case, we will demonstrate how to submit an item that doesn't exist in the Amazon catalog, update it, read it, and finally delete it. Let's go. So as we saw earlier, the first step is to actually confirm that the item doesn't exist in the catalog. To do this, we will use the search operation from the Catalog Items API. We will specify some keywords. In this case, we can use the model of the item we want to sell on Amazon. Under included data, we can limit to basic attributes since we just want to see if the item exists or not. We submit the request and we see from the results that indeed the item doesn't exist. That means that we can go ahead and create it. A non-empty response here could indicate that the item exists, and we will need to execute the workflow for an existing item instead. The next step is to retrieve the JSON schema for the product type of our product. To do it, we will use the getDefinitions product type operation from the product type definitions API. Under product type parameter, we will specify luggage in this case. For this example, we will use the US Marketplace ID, and we also have some additional parameters that you can specify based on your submission. We submit the request, and we can see that under the schema attribute, the API provides an S3 present URL. We will use this URL to get the JSON schema for the product type. So we execute an HTTP GET request to S3, and as a result, get the actual product schema we were looking for. You can see that this is the schema for the luggage product type, and there are a number of attributes and properties are specified here. This will help you generate a JSON document that adheres to the requirements of the listings item API. For example, under the required section, you will find all attributes that are mandatory and have to be specified when submitting a listing. All properties that belong to the product type are also specified, like item name and brand. Once we generate the JSON document with information that we want to submit to Amazon, we will use the put listing item operation. In this step, we will be using the sandbox endpoint of the API. And for the sake of simplicity of this demo, we generated this small request with just 2 attributes. However, when submitting a request to the production endpoint, you will have to include more details. We specified condition type and item name here and the values for them, and we use luggage as the product type. Under item name, we will use just spinner suitcase, and we will try to update this value later. We submit the request and proceed to validate the response. We see that the submission was accepted, which means that the schema validation succeeded. Also relevant is the submission ID. Make sure to log this value since you will use it in case you encounter issues and have to contact developer support. This ID will help our support team debug and troubleshoot your requests and identify the root cause of the error. Also keep in mind that the fact that the submission was accepted doesn't necessarily mean that the item is live in the marketplace, since other issues might be detected in the asynchronous processing stage. But you will be informed about this via notifications. So next, let's check how the patch operation from the listings item API works. Since we want to update a single attribute from the SKU, this approach is recommended instead of submitting all the data using the put operation. We specify the type of change we want to do, in this case replace, the path of the attribute you are updating, and the new value. As you can see, we are now specifying an item name that is more descriptive of our product. We go ahead and submit the request and read the response. The API again informs us the status of the submission and the identifier to use in case we have to contact developer support. After the asynchronous processing finishes, and if there are no errors in the data we submitted, our item should have a new item name. We can confirm this by using the get operation from the listings item API, which gives us information about items in the selling partner's catalog. We specify the marketplace ID and the data we want to get from the API. In this case, we will ask for summaries, offers, fulfillment, availability, and issues. We set the seller ID and SKU and submit the request to the API. If the SKU exists, the response will contain all the information we requested. We can see that the item name has the new value we specified with the patch operation. Awesome. The response also includes the offers and fulfillment availability as we requested. And since our SKU is valid and was correctly processed, we can see that the issues section is empty. So that concludes our demo of an end-to-end listing submission workflow. We went from validating that the item didn't exist in the catalog to creating and reading the listings item in just a few steps. To finalize, let's delete the item from the selling partner's catalog. For this, we will use the delete listings item operation. We again specify the marketplace ID and issue locale, so issues, if any, are returned in the language of our choice. We set the seller ID and SKU parameters and submit the request. As we can see, the response follows the same format as the other operation from the listings items API, and status, submission ID, and issues are reported. With that, we conclude our demo. I hope it was useful to get a better understanding of how the listings API works. So that was pretty much all we had to share with you today. Before wrapping up, here are some useful resources that will help you in the migration journey. These links are included in the handout that we attached to the webinar. So again, make sure to download it from the GoToMeeting tool. There are 3 different files that you will find there. Make sure to get them all. So first of all, the Building Listings Management Workflows Guide is probably the best resource for you to understand how to correctly implement listings workflows that follows the best practices. It includes various use cases like listing new items and updating them, and provides useful information on how to create variations and troubleshoot listing issues. The Migrating Listings Management Workflows Guide is focused on migration from feeds to listings API. So you should find a lot of information that is relevant to your specific use case. Again, this is attached to the handout section of the webinar. There is a set of resources that will help you troubleshoot listings issues. We have also included links to them in the handout. Then the Manage Your Product Listings Lifecycle blog post provides an overview of the different building blocks, including sample requests and responses, the API reference and model of the different API sections, like the Listings API or the Product Type Definitions API, will help you build the interfaces to connect to the SPI. Make sure to check them. And finally, the XPath to JSON mapping file that we mentioned earlier is also included in the handout section. So yeah, that was it for today. I thank everyone joining the webinar for being here today. We hope you find the information that we shared useful. Feel free to contact us via different channels that we have in case you have questions, if you're facing issues, or if you want to learn more. Yep, that was it. See you in our next webinar, and happy coding. Bye-bye.